even had words of advice on how to handle these arrests.
Please don't be too nice.
Let me see your hand! Let me see your hand!
Please don't shoot me, please, man.
I'm not gonna shoot you. Step out and face the wind.
The anger now spreading across the country.
Don't shoot!
Today in New York announced a plan to defund the NYPD.
A town without a police force.
Imagine it happening in your community. The entire police force quits.
I'm totally opposed to defunding the police officers. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 911 call, to have someone with them as a psychologist or psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and be able to talk people down.
Being a police officer is a rough job. It's a lot of stress. It's a hard job to start with. It's demanding physically, mentally, so less people are coming in, and then you get burnt out from all the work you're doing, so then people leave. So it's kind of like, just a circle of like, that door just keeps opening and closing, and now you're at a point where there's not enough people to fill them positions. It all depends on the policy. Policy, you'll hear that from a lot of police officers. Policy is everything.
There is a big power struggle going on, a power struggle between kind of the idea and the concept and those who want to preserve the kind of the militaristic policing, and they think we depend and rely on that. And then there's a power struggle between those who think we need to look at things differently, that historically policing has been a way to oppress people who are poor or who aren't in power or don't own property, and that we need to open up the system more. I think it does get played up in the electoral sphere. And then we've also seen a divided city council on it quite a bit. It was probably divided when I was there. And this problem was bubbling and going along for the 16 years when I served, and was very hard to change in Minneapolis for a lot of reasons.
They just being exposed, and I don't think they've had this kind of light pressed upon them before, and it can feel like oppression to them, but it's really just accountability. So that's what's happening. They being called on their stuff. We have more cameras to capture what they do in Black and brown communities, and they don't like it, so they're trying to create different narratives. But the truth of the matter is there's a culture of cruelty within policing, and it just has to be abolished. There have been so many groups that have tried to reform it. People have flown in to fix it and do all these studies and tests and take 10 and 20 years to figure stuff out. And it's like, the solution is pretty simple. Like, abolition is a practical organizing strategy. It's not something that's far-fetched. We can actually have safe communities, reduce harm, and figure out ways to hold people accountable when they do stuff wrong. So it was a time before policing, and there will be a time after policing.
I would certainly say that some of the criticisms of our profession have been justified. I would also argue that many have not. The advent of social media and everybody being able to just comment on whatever they want to and put false information out there has certainly been something that we've had to battle in this profession. That was something that didn't exist when I got into it 25 years ago. Heck, when I got into this job, we didn't have body mics for what we did out there. And so now going around with body cameras and everything we do is recorded out there has certainly evolved the profession. We need to make sure that we continue to have and get support from our political leaders. We need to get away from some of the divisive and inflammatory rhetoric out there that can cast a negative shadow on this profession. As a profession, we need to do a better job in getting our stories out there.
When you think about who a police officer is, they're people that live in your community, that care deeply about making sure that people are well taken care of and that it's safe. And as society's wrestled with this question about what law enforcement is and what it looks like, police officers, I think, in a lot of ways, have become the focal point of the conversation and have become very stressed out as part of those conversations.
A town without a police force.
Imagine it happening in your community.
Every patrol officer on the Haskell police force quits over a funding fight with their mayor.
Come out. Y'all can find somebody else to patrol the city.
All y'all leaving?
The small city of Goodhue will no longer have a police department.
Packing up their things and turning them into the chief. This after a contentious city council meeting over a dispute of grant funding.
Many of them turning to salary raises to encourage more applicants.
260 officers, that's about 20% of the force, have left in the past year and a half. Think about that for a second.
Know that there's been a couple examples where there's been some mass resignations, and certainly in a community a couple hours away. And I think that really came down to a lack of competitive pay. Here in the metro area, we are blessed to have higher pay, so we're able to attract better candidates. Certainly our city council and our city leaders here understand that we need to attract good candidates and keep good police officers, so we need to remain competitive with our pay and benefits. I think when you get to some of the outstate areas, that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. Certainly they're dealing with different things than we are here in the metro area.
We also know that pay and compensation is another significant factor that's affecting people's willingness to go into this profession. In a number of communities, particularly smaller cities, we hear about wages that are similar in policing to what you could make at the local convenience store. So when you put yourself in a candidate's shoes and you ask yourself, would I want to be a police officer in that small town? The answer sometimes is no, because of the dangers of the job, the pay that you get, and alternatives that you have in the economy that we're in right now.
Police have been costing us more and more, even though the number of police have been going down and down. I do believe that there was a recent year where the mayor proposed reducing the budget somewhat because there were so few officers. So there may have been a slight decline because they were trying to get money to recruit more officers and they couldn't. And in the end of the year, there was money left over. That also has happened recently where there's money left over even though they budget that much. And so there might have been a year when he proposed a smaller budget, but that was really due to the fact that they couldn't hire enough officers. And of course, the biggest expense in a police department and in government usually is personnel and benefits and salaries, wages.
How are you keeping somebody? They complaining over the pay they receive. That's a totally different issue. They saying we're not being compensated enough. That's what they're talking about. They want more money. They want more bread for the service that they provide. And the thing is this, I would love for more of them to resign. I just don't want the community to feel like they don't have anything. You know what I mean? So this is where all those community healers, community helpers, the people who say they are a community resource, this is where you step up and say, hey, we don't want another police force. We got an opportunity to say, what do we want? This is a chance for us to start over. We always said we want an overhaul of the police state. Now they overhauling themselves. Good. Now they got to figure out the next step.
Defund the police movement that was also going on in Minneapolis and other places. And we were able to do that and move some funding to some other things that would help. Not that we reduced their budget, but we reduced the proposed increase. Now, there were other times when the police department needed council approval to do something. And that would give an opening, I felt, that we could maybe make some changes in policy. We were actually able to get a pretty strong policy passed. It got put in the police policy manual. 6 months later, I got a notice from one of the people who'd worked hard on this, a community member, and said, hey, the policy's gone from the website. The policy's gone from the manual. And I was told by the police chief that they'd moved those ideas into the training, and they were still covering them and doing it in training. But of course, not having it written down as a city policy is going to make it a lot harder for anybody to hold them accountable. Nobody could even sue them for for violating their own policies they agreed to if somebody happened to get killed or seriously injured by using these less than lethal weapons, as they call them.
We can't keep putting our faith and our taxpayer dollars into people where there's no accountability of them. You got to protest and fight and demand that they fired and all of that. No, just be able to acknowledge y'all take a lot of money from city budgets. If y'all reduce the amount of money that y'all received and put it in the community.
Staffing is one of the largest challenges facing police departments right now. And in small cities, we've heard of police departments that haven't been able to fill their ranks because there aren't enough qualified, quality candidates. Larger cities are feeling that exact same tension as well, where they have unopened positions, where there aren't enough candidates to recruit to fill these important roles in communities.
Every agency, especially in this state, is struggling to find good quality candidates. We want the best of the best going through these college programs, but we have to be creative in how we recruit them. I say that a lot of times the public sector right now is kind of turning into the private sector. And how can we attract and keep the best people, whether that be increased salaries, wellness incentives, making sure that they stay physically fit, whatever we can do to give them more time off and make sure that they stay healthy.
There was a lot of people saying, of course nobody wants to work for Minneapolis now because everybody hates the police. So there was a lot of criticism of the police department, and some people would say people are being too mean to the police and they are saying bad things about them and potentially hurting them. Why would they ever want to come and work here if this is a police department that kills people on no good reason or whatever?
The alarming consequences of being a cop.
Being a police officer is not an easy job by any means. It is certainly not an easy job under conditions of maximum stress.
All of a sudden, I started to have problems, and I didn't know what it was. I just literally thought I was cracking up.
You have many quitting due to low morale, low pay, long hours, and all while risking their lives to serve and protect.
The ones that you do have out working the street are taxed because they're having to stay longer. They're having to deal with more calls because nobody stopped calling us.
It's no secret that police officers face extreme stress and trauma, often on a daily basis. And nowhere was that more evident than last summer in Dallas when a gunman opened fire during a protest, killing 5 officers.
Me, I decided to leave because I looked at the profession and I wasn't sure if that's something I wanted to do for the next 25 years. I had about 4 years on and I was 25 when I started, so I had about 30 years total to get 55 to reach my retirement. So I was like, I don't think I want to do this for 25 more years. I felt like it was affecting me as a person in general. I was just stressed and I really was getting to a point where I wasn't like dealing with people. Also, I just looked around at the future, I feel like police have a higher divorce rate, it's hard on the family because you're gone so much, hard on, your marriage, kids, everything like that. And I feel like I just didn't want to continue that. So those are the main reasons I left. I had my daughter and it kind of changed the way I wanted to do the job. Also, I didn't want to, make a decision, a split-second decision where I felt like I was doing the right thing in good faith and then end up, all over the news and possibly going to prison, if I did something that I thought was right.
I think in general, there's more scrutiny around what it means to be a police officer today, and that only intensifies a job that was already hard to begin with. So when you hear conversations about defund the police, it makes it harder for people to see that as a career path that they want to get into and one that they want to follow. I think a lot of cities in Minnesota recognize this.
Once they find out that you're an officer that they like and you do the job good and you're doing good work and you're showing promise, they want to move you up. They want you to be a part of teams, part of different things to kind of get you promoted to eventually become a sergeant and get you prepared to be in that position. But when you do all those things, you have so many trainings, you have so many community-oriented policing events you have to be at. So you're there 7 days or 6 days a week. And that takes a toll, on you, mentally and your family. So that's where I kind of felt like the work-life balance wasn't that great, especially because we're short officers, because there's not a lot of officers right now, in the field. It's short. Everyone's short.
There's a lot of agencies and there's a lot of places in the private sector right now that like the skill sets that the police officers have, whether it comes to communication skills, de-escalation skills. So there's a lot of police officers who are currently in this job right now who are leaving for the private sector where they have to worry a little less about criminal liability, civil liability, have a little more flexibility in their schedules. And so what our challenge is to make sure that we keep those employees before we lose them.
It's a hard job to start with. It's demanding physically, mentally, so less people are coming in, and then you get burnt out from all the work you're doing, so then people leave. So it's kind of like, just a circle of like, that door just keeps opening and closing, and now you're at a point where there's not enough people to fill them positions. It's just, I felt like I didn't want to do policing anymore. It wasn't like I wanted to go to another police department to continue my career. I no longer want to be a part of policing.
Put your fucking hands up right now. Let me see your other hand.
Don't shoot me, man.
Step out and face away.
Can you not shoot me, man?
I'm not shooting you. Step out and face away.
Okay. I'm not a bad guy. Please let me stand. No, sorry. Please, man, I can't breathe. I can't breathe, man. Mama, I love you.
Bro, he's not fucking moving.
This man kneeled on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you imagine that?
What do you want? Justice! When do you want it? Now! What do you want?
Justice!
When do you want it?
Now! No justice! No peace! No justice! No racist police!
After George Floyd, I feel like everyone just like hated the police. Like, you would go into places and it was a weird time to be a police officer. And just people's opinions of the police changed dramatically and it shifted. So it's like that shift caused a shift in the police too. People were becoming more, jaded and kind of, upset because they're doing good work and they're trying to protect and serve, and people weren't really appreciating it at that time because of that officer's mistake, and that officer's a bad choice, so.
I would say that in the 16 years that I served on the council, I've seen a shift in the way people think about policing. I will say when I originally ran in the early 2000s, there were people very concerned about police brutality, and there were stories, and even when I was growing up in the 80s, there was stories about police misconduct. There was horrible stories, but I think it's shifted more a little bit to say we have to do more to fix the public safety system than we've been doing.
So me, I grew up in Minneapolis. Attitudes towards the police were always the same, people used to say F the police, they just didn't like the police, and I thought like me becoming, being a police officer, being a black police officer, that would kind of change some of that, once I go into a house and it's a situation where it's a black family, I thought it would be like a connection, like they'd be like, oh, but that was not the case.
If you live in an economically deprived neighborhood, they always treat you as a suspect. So it's like a tale of two Americas, where there are people who call and get this amazing service, red carpet treatment, and then you got other communities where it don't feel like they're there to protect and serve. They there to hunt people and murder.
People were upset and they wanted to voice that, and they wanted to, voice that, and kind of when you were dealing with them, they wanted to kind of say their piece, and if they were under arrest, they wanted to fight any way they could to not be under arrest. Kind of use that whole situation as a way to kind of get out of their situation that probably had nothing to do with it, So it kind of made the police job hard too, because you didn't want to seem like you were, a bad cop just because you were doing your job.
It opened up a conversation with the public around what police accountability and what police culture looks like. In a lot of ways, the pipeline to policing was interrupted by these conversations as people were thinking carefully about what career paths they wanted to get into and what career paths they wanted to follow. the effects of resignations have been particularly pronounced because the pipeline to get into policing isn't what it was before. We know before, if you had a job opening, there'd be hundreds of applicants. Now some cities are only getting a small handful, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty.
The murder of George Floyd and the killing of Daunte Wright has led to calls for more transparency and better training in law enforcement, weeding out the bad people and keeping the good ones. And so we have to take it upon ourselves, especially as chief executive officers of our police departments, to make sure we have the best and highly trained staff available so that we aren't facing another incident that happened back in 2020.
You saw what they did to George Floyd. He wasn't the first. 9 minutes of strangulation. And it's like, we shouldn't have to sit through a trial and wonder if this guy's going to get convicted and punished. It just shows us what's there is not working. It's not working. That guy he's a throat guy. He got a history of going for people's throats. This wasn't the first time. So all the internal affairs, all of their checks and balances are trash.
You know, there have been a number of high-profile incidents that I think everybody has spent some time thinking about that have affected police or that have been perpetrated by police. And one thing that's pretty consistent with every police officer that I've talked to is this theme that they don't want bad cops as part of their ranks. They see their work as a good and noble profession, and they believe deeply in the communities that they serve.
Always concerns about it, efforts to fix it. I actually tried to seize on the opportunity of the police tragic stories several times when I was on the council to change the rules. But the system is also built in a very strong way. There's a union contract, there's state laws, there's federal laws, there's a culture, a lot going on in Minneapolis that makes it very difficult to change the Minneapolis Police Department especially.
Yeah, I saw the culture change a lot. Like when I first started, it seemed like it was proactive, you know, like everybody was out there hunting. And as my career went on and after, you know, stuff happened, you know, it seemed like policing became more reactive. After George Floyd, those things kind of was more implemented into each police department. So I feel like a lot more training is taking place. And I think a lot of that stuff is in the back of people's minds a lot more now because of everything that happened.
When you think about the changes that police departments have encountered over the course of the past few years anyway, a lot of them have been societal. After the murder of George Floyd, policing came under an incredible amount of scrutiny, and there were reforms that were needed. And in conversations about what reform looked like or what it could be, I think we lost in many ways an important level of support that police officers across our state are owed.
City leaders say getting rid of bad cops is hard to do, thanks to the law and an agreement negotiated between the police union and the city.
Let's have the discussion, a real discussion. Stop demonizing us for the job that we do.
We are just over 2 weeks away from the New York State deadline to make changes to police departments.
On the heels of the city outlining a second phase for its plan for the NYPD, law enforcement unions are coming together to give their input, backed by the families of gun violence victims.
According to the New York Times, these unions have gotten increasingly stronger, with membership outpacing many other labor forces.
The union is able to appeal, and then some sort of arbitration process gives 50% of officers who are fired back their jobs, right? And so that's an example of a union that has so much power.
There is no reform effort that will work. There have been a ton of experts who've tried, and they haven't been able to do it. We've had several DOJ reports over the years that all have shown us the same things. This cannot be about enforcing the law if the results keep showing police brutality, excessive force, etc. Something else must actually be happening. So I think the process should be all departments should consider shrinking until they don't exist. So if you got a force with 200, how do you get it down to 150 and put the money that you save from that back into the community?
If more people can see the connection between how we've been doing our criminal justice system and actually negative consequences that have happened to a lot of people, and maybe how it's supporting an unjust economic system or a biased and racist system, I think that we'll all benefit in the long run.
You throw people in a cage, they don't have representation, they don't have the proper defense or adequate counsel, and then you see them going away. Phil Vance is a great example of that, man. We're trying to bring him home now. South St. Paul threw him in prison. He's been in there 20 years, and we got all the information that show he couldn't have done what they say he did. He got convicted on circumstantial evidence. That means he say, she say, led to somebody being in prison for a life sentence. We need a better system. We need new social contracts. Policing in America is an extension of chattel slavery. That's exactly what it is. The past is the present.
I think in Minneapolis in particular, there's some open-mindedness to it. I think there's a lack of courage maybe to actually try some new things, or maybe it's just it feels so complicated because you're gonna have people who are upset and angry or scared about it, but you're also gonna have people willing to try things if it's really new.
A lot of times people think abolitionists are just dreaming, but in actuality, the reformers are the ones that's dreaming. They the ones who believe like they're gonna get this diverse police force that is gonna do something that the white police force didn't do. If you look at East St. Louis, Illinois, I wanna say 90% of their cops are black. The town is 95% black. You think they got a policing problem? They do. Now, tell me what that is. It's the culture of policing. It's the institution. If you shrink the departments and take care of the people who need help the most. And I just want us to be like mindful that there are solutions that work that don't include policing. We should all invest in those. There's more of a future in that than trying to fix what's there.
I hope y'all take this day to inspire yourselves, inspire your classmates, inspire your family to keep fighting. We have to keep going. We can never stop. If we stop, they're going to keep killing us. Simple as that. We have to show them that we can. We have to show them that we matter. Because obviously they don't believe it.